Properties of rectangles, rhombuses, and squares. For this first problem, we're going to decide whether the parallelogram is a rectangle, rhombus, or square. So we know it's a parallelogram. That tells us that opposite sides are congruent, so that would make this one 90 degrees, and consecutive angles are supplementary, making this one 90 and this one 90. So I know that everything has a right angle. And then I also see that my opposite sides are parallel and congruent, so that tells me it's a parallelogram. So a parallelogram with all right angles is a rectangle. So this is a rectangle by definition of rectangle. For this next example, we're going to find the measures of the numbered angles of this rhombus. Okay, so it's a rhombus. We know that the sides are all the same. And we also know that diagonals of a rhombus are perpendicular to each other. So we have perpendicular in there, which makes the measure of angle 2 equal to 90 degrees, which is also equal to the measure of angle 3. Now we should be able to find the measure of angle 4, because if we look at this triangle right here, we have two of the angles, so we should be able to figure out the third angle. 52 plus 90 plus the measure of angle 4 should equal 180 degrees. So then you subtract the 90 and the 52. And then you get the measure of angle 4 equals 38. Okay, and then the last one we have to figure out is 1. Well, in a rhombus, the diagonals are going to bisect opposite angles, making those two the same. And then because it's also a parallelogram, alternate interior angles are the same. So those two are all the same. So 1 is the same as 4. But the measure of angle 4 was 38. So that means the measure of angle 1 is 38. So when you are finding the measures of the numbered angles, you just need to break it down using the theorems that we know to figure out the different angles. For this next example, we are given that HIJK is a rectangle, and we want to find the value of x and the length of the diagonal. So HJ is this diagonal here, and IK is this diagonal here, and in a rectangle, diagonals are congruent, so we set HJ equal to IK. HJ is 19 plus 2x. IK is 3x plus 22. And then we just solve. So if I subtract the 2x over, I get x. And if I subtract the 22 over, I get a negative 3. So x equals negative 3. Once you have x is negative 3, then you can plug it in to find each diagonal. So the HJ would be equal to 19 plus 2 times negative 3, which would be 19 minus 6, which is 13. And the next part we have to find IK, and hopefully it is the same as the one we just found. We have 3 times negative 3 plus 22, which is negative 9 plus 22. which is equal to 13. So the diagonals are congruent, which is what we said in the first place. So x is -3, and the diagonals are both 13. For this next example, we are going to find the values of the variable and then find the length of the sides. So if this is a square, then we know all of the sides are congruent and all of the angles are right angles. So we can just set the opposite sides equal to each other. So 3/5x equals x minus 8. So if I'm solving this problem, I need to put my x's together. So I'm going to subtract 3/5 x from both sides, giving me 0 equals 2/5 x minus 8. Add the 8 over. 8 equals 2/5x. And then I'm solving for x, so I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. 5/2, and then multiply this side by 5/2. So when I simplify this, 5/2 times 8 would simplify to 20 equals x. X is 20. Now I need to figure out what the side length is. So I take my x and I put it in for one of my x's. 20 minus 8 is 12, so the side is 12. For this next example, we want to conclude if this parallelogram is a rhombus, rectangle, or square. So the first thing we know that NP is congruent to OQ. So NP is the same as OQ. So if the diagonals are congruent to each other, then we know it is a rectangle. The reason being is the converse to if it's a rectangle, the diagonals are congruent. So that would be your final answer for this one. For this next example, we want to decide what value of x is this figure, the special parallelogram. And in this case, we want it to be a rhombus. So for a rhombus, we know that the diagonals have to bisect opposite angles, making these two angles the same. So we would set 3x plus 12 equal to 4x, and then solve for x. Subtract the 3x over, and 12 equals x. So for the value of x equals 12, this is a rhombus. That's it for your examples on properties of rhombuses, rectangles, and squares. Should be able to finish your worksheet now and then be prepared for your quiz.